So today I'm doing a video revisiting a video series that I did, I think like 5 years ago, which was, it was a 3-part series about my 5 favorite mods on the Xterra, my 5 least favorite mods that I did on the Xterra, and the 5 things that I would call the Goldilocks Principle, where it's like not too much, not too little, but just right. You know, trying to get that sweet spot. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of revisit those and offer a little bit of my opinions and thoughts on the difference between modifying a newer vehicle like a $40,000 Toyota Tacoma or modifying, say, a $4,000 vehicle like an 18-year-old Nissan Xterra, and revisit what I liked about the Xterra mods and see, you know, what of those would I carry over into a build on the Toyota Tacoma. So on my 5 favorite mods that I did on the Nissan Xterra, I think the first thing on that list was a body lift. And would I do that on a $40,000 vehicle? And the answer is no, for a couple of reasons. One, on a pickup truck, you know, you have the bed of the pickup truck and it's got to be, you know, strong and able to hold all of the payload that you would have in there, whether it's bags of stone, bags of rock. But for me, it just didn't seem like a good idea having pucks just holding up the rear of that pickup truck. Additionally, although I did work through all of the different things that need to be relocated on the Nissan Xterra, it sure is a pain. When you raise up the body or the cab, your engine is still mounted to the frame, and now you got rubber hoses that are connecting from here to here, and that can pull and tug on things. And some of those compromises I was willing to live with on, at the time, like a 15-year-old truck or a 12-year-old truck or something like that. But on a more expensive new vehicle that's in great condition, I just didn't feel good about having now all of these different hoses potentially on more tension, potentially breaking off, you know, fittings on a heater core, on a radiator hose, and things like that. Mod number 2 that I talked about on the Nissan Xterra was a reinforced steering system. Now, the steering system on the Nissan Xterra is a Pitman arm and steering box on the frame with a relay rod or center link going side to side, and that had a lot of flex in it, especially when you get into higher lifts. Newer vehicles, and this Toyota Tacoma has a rack and pinion type steering, and if you do very mild suspension lifts and very mild tire sizes, to me, you don't really need to reinforce that steering. So to me, that's something that, as needed, if you wanted to go big and do 33s and do like a 3-inch suspension lift, then sure, it might make sense. I'm not even familiar enough with the Toyota Tacoma products offering out there to know what type of steering reinforcement there is, but my goal would be to do a much milder lift, so I wouldn't even need to worry about that. So that's something that I really liked that I did on the Xterra, mainly because it was required to be able to have it function correctly. If I can keep things mild on the Tacoma, it's not going to be needed. So number 3 that I really love that I did on the Nissan Xterra was the front locker. So the Laka brand locker up in the front differential. Now, would I do that in the Tacoma? And the answer is no, but I would still do a locker, which is why I got the TRD off-road trim package of the Tacoma, because it comes with an electronic locking rear differential. So I specifically targeted that because I liked having a locker so much. It made off-roading so much easier, but I didn't want to have to go through the hassle of installing a locker, installing air compressors if it's an air locker. And although the you know, front Laka in the Xterra, like, it did well enough, but it definitely does change the steering feel, and you can't just flip a switch and turn it on and off. So I would say no, I wouldn't do the Laka specifically, but I would target a TRD off-road like I did, to make sure that I still had a locking differential somewhere on the vehicle to give you that added capability to get out of, you know, slicky situations. Mod number 4 on the Nissan Xterra that I liked a lot was a stock Airbox mod. Almost every vehicle has some type of modifications you can do to remove some resonators and stuff. And I like that. And the Nissan Xterra, it gave it a nice like engine growl. I can't really say that it gave it a whole lot of performance boost. Most air filters and air intake kits and stuff don't really give you much usable power that can really make a difference. You might think you can tell a difference when you first install it and you're looking for it. I usually don't notice it afterwards, but it was still fun to tinker on that and do that on the Nissan Xterra. One of the nice things about it is when you remove all those resonators, it makes servicing the rest of the like air intake a lot easier. So on an older vehicle where you might be taking the air box in and out multiple times, it's less connections you got to deal with. It's just cleaner engine bay. But would I do that on the Tacoma? Probably not. Not unless I find a situation where I really need to just keep removing the air intake or something, and I'm just tired of dealing with resonators, then I might plug them up and remove them, or do some searching on Tacoma World and see what modifications people typically recommend. But in my experience, like other than kind of the novelty of making a little more engine noise, it didn't really do anything. So although I'm not completely anti doing a stock Airbox mod, it's just not something that provided enough benefit. So it's like, why not just leave it around? Plus, like I mentioned in the previous video, creature comfort is now a lot more important to me. So do I really want more engine noise or exhaust noise? Probably not. The last thing that I said that I really liked in the Nissan Xterra was CB radio, because it's just fun to be able to like talk to people, and it's good if you go on trail rides with other clubs and off-road clubs that run CBs. A lot of off-road parks have other people running CBs as well. So if you're going, to an actual park that attracts the Jeep crowd and things like that, you're more likely to be able to contact someone if you do get stuck or something like that by having a CB radio. Would I put one in the Tacoma? Probably not, but the reason is because my COVID hobby over the last few years has been ham radio. So I've gotten more into amateur radio, and I don't really go off-roading with like clubs anymore. So I would probably just put in a ham radio dual band, get VHF and UHF bands, and not really use the CB. I might try and make like a modular mounting system where I can just like swap the antenna from a CB antenna to VHF, UHF, and then just like swap out with the brackets, one radio versus the other, and use the same wire harness to plug it in. I will look into some type of radio communications, but with radio in general, in a vehicle, I always ask the question, who is it that you want to talk to? So back when I was going to club events where everybody ran CB, or CB was required to have in your vehicle, yeah, it ended up being quite useful, so you could talk to people as you're going out and about. Now I typically just go on kind of small runs with a few friends at URI, and we don't really even use radios. They don't have CB radios. I could get the little FRS, handheld walkie-talkies and throw them one, and then we could probably talk just as well from vehicle to vehicle. The other thing is, in the Tacoma, there's not a lot of great places to mount radios. So trying to find a place to be able to mount a radio without having to butcher the dash and cut a whole bunch of holes and things like that makes it a little bit more difficult. But a lot of the ham radios have detachable faceplates where you got a small control panel that you can mount on your dash, and then you can hide the body of the radio under your seat or in a storage compartment or in the glove box. So I probably will install some type of radio communications, but I still have to figure out what my overall plan is there. So now on to mods that I regret on the Nissan Xterra. Number one was the snorkel, PVC pipe snorkel, the DIY snorkel. Definitely, I would not put PVC pipe type of snorkel on a $40,000 pickup truck. That's just, it's not as proper. When you have a nice newer vehicle like that, you want things to look a little bit more nice, a little bit more finished than just some PVC pipe sticking out of a hole that you just took an angle grinder to in the side of your fender. Some of that can fly on a $4,000 truck, but on a $40,000 truck, I mean, that would be hard to do. Plus, I don't really do a lot of like tall water crossings, and additionally, a lot of people get the snorkel and everything, and I think that means they can go into deep water, but there's other things you got to worry about with differential breathers and water infiltration, like into electrical components and your alternator and things like that. So even though you might have your air intake raised up high, you still got other issues that can arise from going into deep water. So I would not bother with a snorkel of any kind, really. The next mod that I regretted on the Nissan Xterra was diff drop bushings. And there is a different type of diff drop kit for the Tacoma, but again, I would not bother doing a differential drop, mainly because if you do a more mild suspension lift, then you don't have to worry about the extreme angle. On the Nissan Xterra, the diff drop was a while you're in there type of thing because I was already doing the front lockup. But if I'm not removing the front differential to put in a front locker, then there's no real reason to be like, oh, well, while I'm in there, I'll just throw a diff drop in. So not dealing with the diff drop on a Tacoma. The other mod that I regretted was front sway bar removal. Now on the Xterra, I don't mind having no rear sway bar. That's fine with getting better flex out of the rear axle. But the front sway bar on the Xterra caused all sorts of body roll. So am I going to start removing sway bars on a Tacoma? And my answer is probably not. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I don't think I need to, and this is why. One, the rear sway bar on the rear axle, even if it does limit articulation, I have a locking rear differential, so I don't need all that flex out of that rear axle on a Tacoma. I can just lock the rear differential, and now it doesn't matter if one tire is lifting off. On the front end, I don't have a locker. And the front end is where you get a lot of the body roll and body sway anyway. So like, I don't want the on-road characteristics of driving a boat, you know, on the highway. So definitely, I would agree with that for the Tacoma. I wouldn't bother with removing that front sway bar, and I'll leave the rear sway bar on the Tacoma as well. All right, and the other mod that I regretted on the Nissan Xterra is spray on bedliner on bumpers and all sorts of stuff. And this is kind of an overarching theme with, say, a $40,000 truck versus a $4,000 truck. With a $4,000 truck, I was okay doing some spray on bedliner on the plastic, you know, bumpers and trim and stuff. $40,000 truck, I want it to look a little bit nicer. I'll tell you what too, on the Xterra, you know, Club Xterra and Xterra Nation is filled with people that have like bedlined, and use like Monster liner and Herculiner and Rust-Oleum spray on bed liner like all over their fenders and stuff, and done designs. And it looks good, like for the gram, so to speak, as the kids are saying these days. Like, it looks good on the initial photo right after it's done, but it just fades quick, it captures dirt, and it's hard to clean, and then it just never looks good afterwards. So that's kind of like one of those things where it's like the internet hive mind will say like, oh yeah, spray on bed liner and just like bed line your fender arches or whatever. I hated it, so definitely not doing that on a $40,000 truck. And the last segment of the video series was about the Goldilocks Principle. Not too much, not too little, but just right. And this was specifically regarding tires, suspension lifts, and armor. So with the Tacoma, it's kind of similar to the Xterra in this regard, and that like 32s is one size up, and you can fit those with basically like no real issues. 33s can be fit with some modification. On an Xterra, you end up doing body lifts, or you end up trimming, you know, some fender behind the front tires. In the Tacoma world, you end up having to chop like body mounts and some flanges of metal and stuff. And so my conclusion was that, to me, I would go with a milder tire size, and I plan on doing that. I plan on, you know, learning my lesson on the Xterra, and same thing with suspension lift. Instead of going with the highest suspension lift that they make a kit for, I'm gonna do something more mild, maybe in the 2-inch range, and then stick with the 32-inch tires. With armor, this is probably going to end up being more expensive on a Tacoma. On a $40,000 truck, like, I'll get a front bumper. It's going to be a professionally made front bumper. I'm probably going to go with one of the small, low profile front bumpers that still keeps a lot of the plastic styling, so it doesn't look completely like this off-road built up rig with giant tubes and stuff. So I'm gonna go with something a little bit more mild, a little more low profile, but allows me to mount a light bar and a winch. But it's going to be professionally powder coated. So the DIY armor is not something that I will end up doing. So specifically with the things that I'm doing on my Toyota Tacoma, you know, the difference between modding a $40,000 truck versus a $4,000 truck is aesthetics means a lot more to me now. You can kind of tell from how I just broke down those past videos on the Nissan Xterra. The other thing too is that with a more expensive vehicle, protection becomes a lot more of a higher priority. So like on my Nissan Xterra, I never bought skid plates for it. I just did a high enough lift and I said, yeah, I'll miss the rocks. And you know, if I do hit rocks, yeah, I can fix it, whatever, no problem. I don't want to start beating up on a $40,000 truck. So one of the first few things I bought was step sliders. So instead of ones that curve up underneath the rocker panel, they're just steel rock sliders, but they go 0 degrees straight out, so they can be used as a step as well. And I got a set of skid plates to give it some more substantial armor underneath, because I want to make sure that whatever trail I do end up taking this thing on, that it's well protected and that I'm protecting, you know, the investment. On the topic of protection as well, it's not just body armor type protection, but also like interior protection, WeatherTech floor liners and seat covers to try and protect the seats. Like, I don't want to have this super nice new vehicle and then have it, you know, with the side bolsters on the seats be worn through and things like that, especially when I got a dog in the back seat. I don't want him tearing up the seats. So that's my general thoughts on my strategy for modifying a vehicle when you have a disparity in vehicle value. So modifying a 40K vehicle versus a $4,000 vehicle. That's kind of the strategy that I'm going to be taking forward and learning the lessons from my Nissan Xterra to make my Tacoma like even better for what it is that I want it to do. So appreciate you watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content of these videos. Comment below if you have questions or suggestions for future videos, and feel free to check out the About section on my YouTube page. Send me an email if you have any questions on Nissan Xterras or Tacomas for that matter.